You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. I told you before the break that this tyranny is descending on us rapidly and that there are some people doing something about it. And one of them is, of course, Ezra, who's my first guest, Ezra Levin. He is the co-founder and co-executive director of Indivisible, which, I don't know, is a movement that's spread across the country and now just might be the biggest pro-democracy movement in American history. Boy, Ezra, you are busy.
Hey, Edwin, it's great to be here. Always a good time talking with you.
This one-party rule that we've got where the Supreme Court and Congress and the president are all working in sync to undermine our freedoms is so un-American and so dangerous. But there's no normal way to fight back. The institutions have failed, and it's up to the people. That's where the rubber has finally got to meet the road, which is why what you're doing is so phenomenally important.
I think that's right. I was really taken aback by the reconciliation bill, this BBB bill, as Trump called it. It is one of the least popular pieces of legislation in American history. It is a piece of legislation that cuts Medicaid and other health care services for the vast majority of Americans while cutting taxes for billionaires and millionaires. The people were pushing against it. We were driving massive amount of calls and actions to vulnerable Republicans, trying to convince them to vote in line with their constituents' interests. The kind of campaign that we ran in 2017 to save the Affordable Care Act successfully, and it was striking how little success we had pulling over even vulnerable Republicans who should fear for their future political lives for supporting this legislation, and they still voted for it. They still voted for it because they are more scared of Donald Trump and MAGA than they are of their own constituents right now. And that's dangerous. That's dangerous for democracy. And what it tells me is focusing on Congress is not enough. Focusing on the courts, I think we're finding, is not enough. We have to actively push back against this administration, this federal overreach, wherever we are, in red states, blue states, and purple states, in rural communities, urban communities, suburban communities. That's what we need to do right now. And that's where our focus is now shifted in the aftermath of the reconciliation bill fight. Yeah.
They passed a law that nobody wants that's going to hurt us, and they didn't care. And so that
That's
means
right.
that democracy, the normal checks and balances of democracy, including you got to worry about your voters, doesn't seem to bother them. So we really have to step up. And I actually worry about the integrity of our next election because I know they're coming after it. But look, we talked, I don't know, a couple months ago, right after you released your updated strategy guide. And here we are again as you launch a new training effort, A Million Rising, which I understand is like off to, a far more successful launch than any of Elon Musk's rockets.
Yeah, we're pretty jazzed about it, I got to say. So this came out of the No King's Day protest. We had, for folks who weren't paying attention that day or were in a cave with your eyes closed and your fingers in your ears, not consuming any sort of media of any kind, No King's Day was one of the largest protests in American history. We were in 2,169 communities, actually not just in America. We were across 27 countries. We showed up on Flag Day. June 14th happened to be Donald Trump's 79th birthday, the day of his ridiculous birthday military parade that he threw for himself. But Donald Trump looked really small on that day. He looked small and weak. And we had people, 5 to 6 million people showing up saying, we don't do kings in America. An incredible day, an incredible demonstration of the power of nonviolent, peaceful protest in America. And that's a great feeling on that day. But the success of any one day of protest is not just in the number of people who come out on that day. It's how successfully do you plug those people, especially brand new people, into persistent on the ground organizing. And that was the genesis of 1 Million Rising. We said, we need to move beyond just calling our member of Congress, just focusing on this administration and focusing on how can we leverage power in our own communities to focus on the pillars of democracy that are under threat by this administration. That's media institutions, that's businesses, that's law firms, that's universities. It's not just Congress. It's not just the courts. It's all of the parts of civil society that can either be resisting authoritarian overreach or supporting the current regime, and we want them on our side. So we launched 1 Million Rising earlier this week with some leaders in the field of pushing back against authoritarianism, folks like Maria Stephan and Erica Chenoweth of 3.5% fame, if folks know that figure, the number of people that you need to actively engage to push back against authoritarianism. We had 150,000 people register for this training on nonviolent strategic non-cooperation. 150,000. Edwin, I leave it to the experts to judge, but the experts said this was the largest training in history on nonviolent strategic non-cooperation. So we're breaking records. Lots of people who weren't engaged before are lifting their heads up and asking themselves a basic question: what can I do? And we're trying to point them in the right direction.
Would you? There's so much there I loved. Would you just tell everybody more simply what nonviolent strategic?
Yeah.
Say it in common man language.
Yes, right. Strategic non-cooperation is based in this understanding of how authoritarian breakthrough moments work out. And we are in this current moment that the experts in authoritarianism, they describe it as authoritarian breakthrough. And an authoritarian breakthrough moment is a race against time. It is a relatively brief window in which a would-be authoritarian government tries to consolidate power and attack alternative sources of power. So this is not just a right-wing government passing particularly right-wing legislation like we just saw. That's part of it. That is part of it. But it's not just that. We have had right-wing governments in the past. Reagan cut taxes for millionaires and eviscerated the social safety net. George W. Bush passed tax cuts for rich people and eviscerated the social safety net. That is bad and also somewhat normal. What is not normal is the authoritarian breakthrough moment in which you see a government attack media institutions and try to cow them, attack law firms and attempt to get them on their side, attack universities to try to get them to change their curriculum. That is new. That is new and different and scary and looks like authoritarian breakthrough moments in different countries where would-be autocrats became actual autocrats. Yeah. So the whole idea of strategic non-cooperation is to organize people power to focus on those institutions. How can we get universities to fight back like Harvard has fought back and not power in the corner like Columbia University? How do we get law firms to fight back, unlike Paul Weiss law firm? How do we get media institutions to fight back or resist, unlike CBS firing Colbert? That requires some basic understanding of the moment we're in, some basic framework for understanding why these institutions respond to people, how they can respond to people, and then some toolkits for how you can do it in your own community. So that the training that we're offering, it's a 3-part training. We've just done the first one. We're going through in the next couple of months to do more. That's the plan.
Yeah, it's fabulous. I actually teach a course on this, on the challenges of American democracy at a university here in Chicago, and autocratic breakthrough. I started this a few years ago, warning about it. Then what can you do about it? And now I think the next time I teach it, it's going to be, we're in the midst of it. How can you save the democracy? I'm not sure we have one anymore. I think we have to save it or restore it.
We're in a period of competitive authoritarianism now.
Yep.
We do have a democracy, Edwin. That what I would say is it is important for us not to give power to these would-be authoritarians that they don't have. We have to simultaneously compete in elections and wipe the floor with the would-be authoritarians in elections, while we also don't just wait and sit on our hands for the next election to come. So we competed in the Wisconsin Supreme Court election at the same time that Elon Musk was pumping $20 or $30 million to try to buy it, and we won. We won. We kicked his butt up and down the state. We will compete in the elections in New Jersey and Virginia in a couple of months. We will compete in the midterm elections in 16 months. But we have to recognize that we're in a different period of our democracy right now.
Absolutely.
It's not enough to say we're just going to register voters and knock on doors and get out the vote. We have to recognize that our democracy is under threat, not sometime in the future, but right now, and it's incumbent on us to identify, okay, how can we effectively join together to push back against this overreach? Some institutions are doing it naturally, some are not. And what we need to do is we need to convince them that the period that we're in right now, that is a scary period, no doubt, where the authoritarian is indeed threatening real harm if folks do not fall in line. This is a scary period, but it will be replaced. It will be replaced by a period of accountability.
Yeah,
we need to convince these institutions that reality is coming. But it's up to all of us to do it.
I totally agree with that. And I want to say that even in regimes that don't pretend to be democratic, think of China, they are terrified of their people. People have power. They have lots of power, even in regimes where the government isn't used to listening to them. And here, they still have that habit. Companies still have to respond to their consumers. We are not helpless, not even remotely helpless.
That is exactly right. And you said an important word there. People have power. Individuals, yep. you individual listening to this program right now, you individually, unless you're super rich or super well-known and famous, you individually have very little power, vanishingly small amounts of power. But amazingly, in this system of government that we currently live under, you collectively, with many other people in your community, can, in fact, build and wield power. And by power, I simply mean you can move people and institutions to do things they otherwise would not do. You can move leaders, you can move institutions, but it starts by building that power with other people in your community. Yeah. This is why our unit of activism at Indivisible is not the individual. It is not individual-based organizing. We are not trying to get people to sign online petitions so we can ask you for money. That is not our game. We believe in group-based organizing. That's why there are 2,500 local Indivisible groups in small towns and big cities and rural areas and suburban areas all over, started by volunteers, led by volunteers, run by volunteers, and building real political power that changes what's politically possible at the local, state, and federal level. That is the unit of democracy that we work with, and I would encourage everybody listening, find your local community. Maybe it's an Indivisible group, maybe it's a different local community, but the way to start is to stop being alone. We're not going to fix this alone. We've got to join with others.
So I have two thoughts about that. One, I've been, in my own neighborhood and encouraging people wherever to get to know all your neighbors, in particular because of the ICE challenge we all face. You want to be able to just start there, get to know the people who live around you so that when ICE shows up and says, I'm arresting this child molester murderer who lives next door to you, you say, no, I'm sorry. He teaches in a school down the block, and he is a friend and a neighbor. I mean, right? We need to know each other and look out for each other and start small. But what you're doing is starting small and getting big. And it was always the way progress was made in America. We outsourced it to lawyers for the last 40 years and lost this muscle. Just one you're reminding us to use again. But every bit of progress, whether it's pushing back against slaveholders before the Civil War or pushing back against Jim Crow, the whole civil rights movement, the whole women's voting rights movement, these were all mass movements of people who came together. And it was not one individual. It was, as you've pointed out, the collective strength of people. Labor, same thing.
I'm a true believer in this, and I would even go a step further. I think we've talked about this before. I think there are few things more human than gathering in small groups together geographically in your community. This is how we survived saber-toothed tiger attacks. It's how we took down woolly mammoths. We survived in small bands of people. We are the great-great-great-great-grandchildren, not of people who went out on their own. Those people died of exposure and didn't pass on their genes. We are the descendants of group-based organizers. That's how we built up societies. That's how we survived. That's how we thrived. And there is a modern society, technological, economic system that is built on treating you as an individual to extract wealth from you and keep you isolated. That's not going to work for us right now. We have a would-be authoritarian system of government that wants you to feel alone. That's not going to work for us right now. The most rebellious act against this authoritarian overreach that you can make right now is to meet with your neighbors and talk about your shared concerns. So important.
I mean, and this is true in almost every aspect there is. Let's think about public health for a second, Ezra. I remember when they just told individuals, put down the cigarette, and it didn't work very well. But the biggest thing we ever did to make the world healthier was collectively get together and build sewer systems. We got rid of water-based diseases quickly, but it was only by working together that we did this. And it was phenomenally effective.
Look,
today's Republicans would say, dig your own well, take care of your own sewage, right? You're on your own. And you're not on your own. That's the point.
We're really not on our own. I think one of the really amazing things that I've heard repeatedly from Indivisible group members, especially in red areas, is they took a chance and they went to their local Indivisible meeting because they got fed up. Maybe it was kids in cages. Maybe it was the attack on Medicaid. Maybe it was the alligator Alcatraz or whatever you want to call it, the internment camps they're building. Exactly. Something caused them to lift their head up and get outside their comfort zone a bit and attend their local meeting. And what they discovered was, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. There are a lot of other people in this community that I thought of as maybe a Trump country or as a Republican county. And yet there are a lot of people here who agree with me and are trying to figure out what they can do to fight back. I hope everybody knows who's listening to this, it doesn't matter how red or rural your community is. There are people who think like you, and they want to not feel alone either. They want to feel like they've got community. And if you don't have a local group, you can start it. And I guarantee you, if you put the call out, people are going to come. And can I just make one more note to respond? You brought up the ICE. Funding the ICE agents that are terrorizing communities. I think that is really, really important to focus on because there's a lot of bad in this reconciliation bill that passed in the last couple weeks. But much of it is hidden. Much of it is not going to take full impact until after the midterm elections, and that's by design. It's a smart political move to avoid accountability. But one exception to that is the creation of the largest federal law enforcement agency in the history of the Republic in the form of ICE. If you look at what this administration was doing to L.A., terrorizing L.A. communities, tearing apart families, militarizing it, ask yourself, why only L.A.? Why haven't they done that in other parts of the country? Why aren't they actively terrorizing Seattle and Chicago and New York and Austin at the same scale? And the answer is, at least up until this point, they haven't had the money. But now they have the money, Edwin. Now they are taking that L.A. show on the road, and they are going to be doing the exact same thing in other communities. So especially for listeners who are white, who are native-born, who don't have to fear directly for their immigration status, it is incumbent on all of us to get real smart, real fast on how this secret police force is going to be terrorizing our communities, and we got to show up and link arms with those directly under threat. That's the front lines of this fight against authoritarian breakthrough.
You wrote a stunning piece about your visit to an ICE facility. You want to talk about that?
It was dystopian and heartbreaking. I was out in Washington State for a statewide Indivisible convening. We're doing these all over the country in all 15 states that have blue trifectas. So Democrats control the state house, the state senate, the governor. And the idea here is that these blue states in particular can go on offense. Illinois, New Mexico, Washington, Oregon, California, New York. There's an opportunity to go on offense, not just defense, but how can we affirmatively push forward to protect our residents and provide safe haven for residents of other states. So I was out there for this statewide convening, and as part of that statewide convening, the members went to the local ICE detention facility. In no small part because one member of a local Indivisible group, Indivisible Skagit, a guy named Lalo, was being held there and had been being held there for more than 100 days. This is a guy who was a union organizer, a farm worker, and a local Indivisible leader. He had been linking those two worlds with great success, bringing in the Indivisible organizers with the farm worker organizers, and he had then been targeted by ICE and held captive in this ICE detention facility. I got to tell you, Edwin, walking into that facility felt like walking in history, and not in a fun way. It felt like going into internment camps. It was awful. It was awful, and it is so bad that Lalo chose to self-deport. That's the most recent news, rather than remain in that facility longer because of mistreatment. And the heartbreaking thing about Lalo's story is is not just his individual story. He's got a very supportive community, both here at Indivisible, but also in his community in Washington. But his story is one of thousands, and a fast-growing number of people.
Soon to be 10,000.
Yeah, tens of thousands of people, no doubt, who are going to be targeted. And it's just accelerating. We are going to see an unimaginable number of these camps, of these concentration camps constructed in America. People are dying. People are going to die in these camps. Families are going to be torn apart. This is not a moment to say, well, the Republicans are really going to get crushed in the midterm 16 months from now. That's not the response to concentration camps being constructed in America. The response has to be organized opposition. One thing I will say about Washington State, that horrible detention center, which is run by a private for-profit corporation, and Washington State, because it is a blue state, was able to pass a law forbidding for-profit private companies from running these detention facilities, and that one is scheduled to close in the coming months. That is good. It is good that it is closing. I think a question for all of us who live in blue states, I live in Maryland, if you're in Illinois, if you're in New York, if you're in California, you should be asking, what can we do to go on offense? What is my governor not doing that they can do? What is my city council person, if I'm in a blue city, doing that that they could be doing? What is my state legislator, my state senator, what could they be doing? And we should push them to do those things, not just wait for the next election.
No, I'm pushing in Illinois for a constitutional amendment like some of the states have statutes now banning, arresting somebody when you don't show your ID. You're hiding behind a mask. And in part because that will be on a ballot, too, and draw people out. So there are things we should push for.
We were, as part of the statewide committee in Washington, we had an entire session on demasking ICE and what we can do at the local and state level. Because you can go on Amazon right now and buy a fake ICE costume if you want to dress up like an ICE officer to terrorize the community. And currently, ICE officers are not showing their faces and not identifying themselves. And so it's no surprise that you're also going to see vigilantes who take advantage of that kind of secret police behavior to engage in violent acts themselves. We saw this kind of behavior in the assassinations of Minnesota lawmakers. The guy who did it dressed up as a police officer. It is no surprise that the right-wing wackos who would like to cause terror and use violence against their political enemies are taking advantage of practices that the state forces are using right now. But we don't just have to accept that. That's the thing. This is we are not just victims of We have power. Donald Trump is an unpopular lame duck president. Even on immigration, he is 15 points underwater, according to most recent polls, because it turns out even if you're somebody who likes the idea of stronger borders, even if you're somebody who likes the idea of some of Donald Trump's immigration policies that he campaigned on, you don't like denying people due process. You don't like disappearing Americans to an El Salvadorian gulag, and you don't like the militarization of American cities like they're doing in L.A. He doesn't have support for this. So it is not just the morally advantageous, the morally right thing to do to push back against this. If you're a politician, this is politically advantageous for you to be seen fighting against this federal overreach. But we've got to convince politicians that it's in their interest to actually fight back. And we do that not just by making a donation or not just by making a call, but by organizing in our community to push collectively. That's what politicians, that's what leaders of institutions actually respond to.
Yeah, we do it by becoming stronger, and we become stronger together. Yeah. I had two related conversations. One last week with Andrea Pitzer, who's an expert on concentration camps, who scared me to death by explaining to me that is exactly what we're doing. And the other with a great scholar from the University of Chicago on federalism, on what states can do and what the federal government can do, and how that fight has gone back and forth. And, we talked about the 10th Amendment. Ezra, the 10th Amendment is like no one's ever tested this, but it says power is not, given to the federal government, are reserved to the states and to the people. And no one's ever tested what the and to the people mean. And our founders understood it, and then people must have forgotten it. But I think you're on the verge of testing what that actually means. And we may have to go to court and test what it means, too, because people have real power. The people have real power.
So I've seen two effective sources of pushback against Trump in the last 8 months. One has been the courts, and the other has been organized people action. That's it. I worry about the courts, to be honest.
Yes, because the Supreme Court is in the tank. Yes. I mean, the judges, Republican and Democrat, have done a fine job. I give them a lot of credit. But the way our system of law works, the Supreme Court has a lot to say. And this unsigned, unexplained dicta of theirs is dangerous, repulsive, autocratic. I mean, John Roberts is maybe worse than Roger Taney. It's a very tough call.
It is a tough call. He is quietly, actively, very ingeniously, without trying to keep his hands clean, supporting this administration's overreach.
Yes, but it has also supported undermining people forever, undermining the Voting Rights Act, doing Citizens United. His hands aren't clean.
Oh, his hands absolutely are clean. I mean, he made a name for himself in the Reagan administration trying to gut the Voting Rights Act. I mean, he is ideologically driven, and he pursues his policy agenda very effectively. So I'm under no illusion about that, which is why, look, I'm all for testing the 10th Amendment or testing other innovative legal strategies, and I have very little faith that this Supreme Court is coming to the rescue.
I agree.
I think the courts at a lower level have held on and done a lot of good work.
Yeah.
And also, I'm not counting on the courts to save us. I'm just not. I don't think ultimately if Trump is able to consolidate power further, will the courts continue to hold? Will the Supreme Court back up lower court rulings? My guess is no. My guess is no, and the real backstop for democracy has to be organized people power.
And let's be clear, you're not counting on Democrats either. This is not partisan on your part. This is about people and organizing and democracy. And I mean, I think about the Democrats who voted for the crypto bill this week. For gosh sakes. You don't care who's standing on what side, as long as the people are heard and, democracy works. As you say, we've had conservative governments before. That's not a threat to democracy. It's a threat to other things, but it's not a threat to democracy.
Look, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger are greater friends to American democracy than many elected Democrats. This is not particularly partisan. There are far too many elected Democrats in Congress and elsewhere right now who might engage in the aesthetics of opposition. They might give a long speech or send out a blistering press release attacking Donald Trump.
Asking for money.
But when it comes down to and then they will ask you for money. But when it comes down to their votes, you're exactly right. We had more than 100 Democrats vote for a crypto bill that allows Donald Trump to take in more bribes through crypto. They just did this. We have Democrats in the Senate who repeatedly have voted for this man's nominees to the cabinet and to lower level Senate confirmable positions. Well, enough Democrats voted for the Republican budget bill that it deprived the Democratic caucus of using leverage to extract any concessions from this administration. You look at how ICE is terrorizing communities right now. How do they have as much power as they do? Well, Democrats voted for the Lake and Riley bill and gave it to Trump in his first week to sign into law, which gives a stronger hand to ICE to terrorize communities. Look, I think there are a lot of good fighting Democrats right now. You've got Maxwell Frost, you've got Jasmine Crockett, you've got Chris Murphy. There are a lot of leaders in this fight, but there is a division right now within the Democratic Party. It's not ideological. It's not between the left and the on economic policy or on social policy. The real division in the party right now is between those who think we're facing an authoritarian breakthrough moment and those who believe this is more or less politics as usual and we've just got to win the next election. And I'm sorry to say it is a real split. And if we are going to have a unified opposition party, we've got to take advantage of this primary season to kick out the rollover and play dead Democrats and put in their place fight back Democrats.
Yep, I am. I stand with you on that. I'm terrified that. I mean, and there are some Republicans who are, who I think would stand up if we could give them help. So the democracy itself is at stake and not left, right, and that is a message that is hard for people to hear because it breaks old habits.
That's right. Look, and I dream of the time in our future where I can fight against a Liz Cheney or an Adam Kinzinger on social or economic policy because we don't agree on much there. And that's fine. But the thing I respect about them is they understand that, yes, those are differences that we have, and they are not the dominant political question of the day. And the dominant political question of the day is, do you want autocracy or do you want democracy? And they have firmly planted themselves on one side. I would love to see, a Chuck Schumer or a Hakeem Jeffries, the leaders in the Senate and the House of the Democratic caucuses, take up the fight as strongly as those conservative Republicans have. But I would note there is Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger are not elected Republicans anymore, and that's
for a reason.
Not a surprise. There is not a single elected Republican in Congress who is actually willing to stand up and fight back. Those Republicans have been defeated in primaries in past election years.
I agree. So there are some examples. I mean, what happened at CBS, appalling, but the 12-member board of the Fulbright scholarship crowd all resigned en masse rather than let Trump, that's the kind of thing we need to see. Like, no, you do not get to take us over in our name. That's not going to happen.
That's right. Look, we were in contact with the Harvard organizers in the lead up to, the bullying that they've experienced. And what we heard directly from them as they started putting up more of a fight was that the hands-off protests in April this year were instrumental in helping them find courage. I think I hope people understand as they're trying to consider, like, what's the point? Like, why show up at all? How can this have impact? And the answer is, all these institutions, all these leaders right now in this moment are unsure of what to do. They're honestly unsure. And they're trying to preserve their institution. They're trying to preserve their reputation. They're trying to be smart right now. And if you believe that Donald Trump is indeed going to consolidate power effectively, and he is attacking you or your institution, the smart move is to give in. That is the smart move. But they are trying to see, is there going to be a fight back? is democracy going to reassert itself? Are the people going to organize? And so showing up in this moment is part being on the right side of the history. You want to raise your fist and say no kings. That's partly good to do for yourself. But you're also sending a message with millions of other people that do this to those institutions, to those leaders that, hey, we're going to move beyond this. This period we're in is temporary, and we are showing you with our actions that this is temporary. So I have seen in the last 8 months effective organizing that sends strong signals that then firms up institutions that might otherwise crumble. I think going forward, we just got to get smarter and more targeted in how we do this. So coming out of the 1 million rising trainings, the next training is July 30th. That's a train-the-trainer training. So we are not just training people. We are telling people, here's how you can host these events in your own communities to train other people. That's how we reach scale. In these trainings, we are ultimately going to lead to some number of national campaigns, but a lot of this is going to be work done at the local level, because what you do in Hope, Arkansas, or what you do in Fort Lauderdale, or what you do in Austin is going to be different than what the folks in Chicago or New York or San Francisco do. And that's okay. That's good. That's good.
That's great.
Because you shouldn't just sign a single online petition and think you've done your civic duty. That's only going to result in you getting asked for money by some institution. What you should do is focus on who can you actually move based on who you are, where you are, what your community looks like, what is your opportunity to actually make a difference, and focus on that. And if we all do that, that ladders up to actual national change.
Ezra, you're on fire, and I know that that's contagious, and lots of Americans feel like you feel, and you're giving them a place. You're giving them a path to use that fire. It's fabulous. It's absolutely fabulous. I want to look ahead with you just a little.
Yeah.
I'm terrified about the national police force that has been empowered to report to the president alone, with very little checks and balances in a system where he's been told he has immunity and we don't have to worry so much about due process. And I am also worried that as we come to the next election, these armed thugs are going to surround polling places in mostly Black and Latino neighborhoods, saying, we know illegals are voting and we're here to look at that. And that will depress turnout and do all kinds of things that are directly impacting election results. I hope that as we continue to grow together and grow our organizations, we are able to protect voting.
I think you should be worried. I think we should all be worried. I don't think anybody who is paying attention right now to this forces being built up is thinking, this is going to be fine. I mean, we just gave $171 billion to the secret police. They are going to be constructing camps around the country. They're going to be hiring thousands upon thousands of ICE agents. It's going to be a full employment program for the Proud Boys. And anybody who thinks that this is just targeted at immigrants, I'm sorry, you've got another thing coming. That they are going to use this force to push back against political adversaries, to push back against organizers, and to help cement their power. That this isn't me talking. Like, I'm an organizer, I'm biased, sure. The folks that we work with, though, they're, again, Maria Stephan, Erica Chenoweth, Timothy Snyder, Heather Cox Richardson, the political scientists and the historians who are experts in authoritarianism, who have watched democracies die in other countries, are looking at our situation now and are not saying, hey, this could get bad, we should be ready. They say, we are there now. And the question is, do you fight back against it or don't you? So I'm deeply concerned about how these forces are used, not just to target immigrants, which is horrible enough, but also to target the very foundations of our democratic system. I remain committed to the one path that I know to push back, which is local, distributed, geographically spread out and ideologically diverse people power. That is what we have when the government engages in tyrannical acts like we're seeing now. And the good news, though, I mean, that sounds scary, and it is. The good news is I believe Donald Trump and the MAGA forces are are the minority. They are not acting from a place of strength. You said this earlier. In other autocratic societies, they are terrified of people power. They are terrified of it. What we know from the Eric and Chenoweth's work, I mentioned them recently, and we just had them on our weekly call earlier this week. Eric and Chenoweth and Maria Stephan, the two folks who came up with this 3.5% figure, looking at more than 300 countries where autocratic breakthrough has happened in the past. And they found that it doesn't require half the population to stand up and say no. I think that's a common misconception that Donald Trump won a plurality of the vote, and so we need tens of millions of people out because that's the only thing. No. What we know from history is that you need about 3.5% of the population to show up in a persistent, organized way, and that works to push back against the authoritarian. That's all you need. In the U.S. context, that's maybe double the number of people we had out on No King's Day. It's a lot, sure.
It's doable.
Absolutely not. It's doable.
Absolutely doable. Absolutely doable, and you're going to get there. I really didn't want to go here, but I'm here. I think your observation about how terrified these minority power plays, these tyrants who don't represent the majority of people are, was fully on display in the absolute existential meltdown that Trump is having over Jeffrey Epstein. This is just, because whether it's important or not, this is the thing that people seem to care about, and he can't control it, and he'll eat them alive. He's terrified.
Well, he's terrified because he's fracturing his own base. The most recent polling I saw on this was 4% of the American public thinks that the Epstein files should not be released. 4%. I mean, there's nothing that
4% doesn't count like nothing in a poll.
Yeah, I mean,
96% of Americans agree on something. 96% of Americans can't agree that it's daytime.
I know. Look, so I think this is really dangerous for him, not because it unifies Democrats against him, not because even independents are on our side, but the fact that MAGA itself has in no small part been built up by conspiracy theories and by the fanning of the flames that Trump himself and his own cabinet members have done here. I don't know what's in the files. I don't know if Trump's name's on it. What I do know is he's acting as if there's some real incriminating stuff in there. And I know that he and his allies promised repeatedly, practically ran on the promise to release these files. And so now MAGA is being confronted with this reality that the guy who promised to reveal who the child human traffickers, the sex traffickers, the pedophiles were, is now suddenly refusing to do so. And that shakes faith. That really shakes faith. I think it's very dangerous for him. I don't want to make light of it. People have been harmed in incredible ways by Epstein and Trump and others who engaged in this behavior with Epstein. And so this isn't just political. This is people's lives were impacted. And I don't think we should treat it just purely as a political matter. But Trump is treating it as a purely political matter. And he is in a very vulnerable position because he appears to be caught between a rock and a hard place. The rock is the mythology that he built up around this, and the hard place is his own culpability. I don't know how he gets out of it.
I don't either. And when an emperor has no clothes, that makes a big difference amongst his followers. Well, listen, tell everybody again how they sign up. So whatever you want. So we have about 2 minutes, and I want to be sure people know how to sign up for the next training.
Oh, well, that's the most important thing. We can drop Epstein. I'm happy to talk about what people can do. So my bias is always towards what you can do. I think it's important that people listen to you, Edwin, and tune into folks who are actually describing what's happening in this world. Consuming good political media to understand where we are is important. But I really, really hope that people don't just consume media. My goal is for people to be active participants in democracy. I co-run Indivisible National, so I have a bias for Indivisible, but I with people that you want to organize with and organize with them. So if you don't have a home, check out indivisible.org. Go and find your local group. If there's not a group, start a group. You can do it with a friend and invite some people over, have some conversations, and then identify what can we actually do. the really important thing in this moment is to not feel alone and not just sit on the couch doom scrolling or listening to things that make you sad and depressed about the state of the world. We can win this. We will win this, but it's going to take more of us. So if nobody is going to come in and save us, and nobody's going to tell you, okay, it's your turn to lead. But if you need somebody to say that, here is me saying, it's your turn to lead. We need you. Sign up. You are welcome. Let's go win this thing. Go to indivisible.org, join the trainings, get involved, and help us save democracy.
Ezra, I am so grateful to you for this work. I can't say. Thank you. And I will be signing up for the 30th because I think it's really important stuff. Really, really important stuff. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you, Edwin. Good talking as always.
Yep. Take care.